That day, no one imagined that a simple neighborhood mechanic would silence one of the richest men in the city. The roar of an expensive engine that no one could fix echoed through the garage, until he showed up, hands covered in grease, a calm gaze, and a way of moving that screamed he knew exactly what he was doing, but what no one expected was what this man would be able to do in just a few minutes. Tom was the kind of guy people didn't notice on the street. He was in his early 30s, with messy brown hair and a face always smudged with grease, even when he tried to clean it. He wore the same old jumpsuit every day, the name stitched in the corner almost faded. He worked in a small garage, tucked away in a neighborhood where luxury never reached. But that day, the sound that filled the gate wasn't from any ordinary car, and the way he looked straight ahead, it felt like he knew something big was about to happen. The garage was his world. The cracked walls, the smell of oil, the radio crackling with old songs, everything that was part of the routine of a guy who never had much but put his heart into everything. Tom didn't talk much. He let his hands do the speaking. When he grabbed a wrench, he looked like an artist with a brush. He was a man of few words, but his calmness annoyed anyone who was always in a rush. He'd been like that since he was a kid. While other boys played outside, Tom would take apart fans, broken radios, anything that made noise. He was curious about anything with a motor. He learned the basics from his father, who was also a mechanic, and the rest he learned by watching, making mistakes, and trying again. His father always said, "Listening to a car is like listening to people, son. Everyone speaks in their own way." Tom never forgot that. That morning was hot, and the sound of passing cars outside mixed with the hum of the compressor. Tom was focused, changing the oil in an old car, when he heard the deep roar of a different engine. He paused for a second, wiped his hands on a rag, and looked toward the entrance. A black car, shining like it had rolled straight out of a movie, pulled in slowly. The kind of car that didn't belong in a place like this. The other mechanics stopped too. No one knew who the owner was, but the weight of money could be felt just from the chrome gleam. The car's hood reflected the sunlight like a mirror, and the engine sound cut off in a metallic sigh. The silence that followed was strange, almost respectful. Even the radio seemed to lower its volume on its own. Tom took a deep breath and stepped forward, curious. The driver got out first, wearing a suit and dark sunglasses. Then the back door opened slowly, revealing a tall man in an expensive suit with an arrogant gaze. He was the kind of person who wasn't used to waiting, and even less used to stepping on greasy floors. He looked around with a hint of disgust, as if he had accidentally entered a place he didn't belong, and Tom, without even knowing who he was, felt the atmosphere change. The billionaire, Richard Evans, watched everything with suspicion. He spoke in a firm, impatient voice, complaining that the car had completely stopped and that no one has been able to fix this so far. Tom listened quietly, just observing the engine with his usual curious gaze. The other mechanics whispered among themselves, exchanging looks that said, "This guy won't even try." But Tom didn't say a word. He only gave a small, knowing smile, wiped his hand on his pants, and approached the car calmly. While the billionaire spoke loudly, Tom lowered his head, listened to the engine, and ran his hand over the bodywork. There was something there, something he could feel but didn't yet understand. The air felt heavy, and everyone expected him to give up. But he wasn't going to. And in that moment, with a steady gaze and a racing heart, he realized this would be the challenge that would change everything. A few minutes later, the car sat in the middle of the garage, black and polished, like it had rolled out of a luxury showroom. The engine hissed and coughed, making noises that nobody had been able to fix. Even the most experienced mechanics had tried and failed. And now here it was, in Tom's small, humble garage. Everyone watching held their breath. Richard Evans stepped closer, his expensive shoes clicking against the concrete floor. He looked at the car with a mix of pride and arrogance, as if saying, "This is untouchable." He didn't glance at Tom, but the man could feel the weight of the billionaire's scrutiny. It was the kind of pressure most people would buckle under, but Tom just adjusted his sleeves and squatted next to the engine. The car's interior gleamed like a jewel, the leather seats untouched, the dashboard shining. Tom noticed small details that others might overlook. The tension in a belt, a loose wire tucked behind a panel, the faint smell of overheated oil. He listened, really listened. Every hum, click and vibration spoke to him, telling him what had gone wrong. Richard crossed his arms and smirked. "You know, even the factory engineers couldn't fix this," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. His voice was dripping with condescension. The other mechanics shifted uncomfortably, some nodding quietly, agreeing with the billionaire. Why even try, they seemed to think, but Tom didn't respond. He didn't need to. Instead, he opened the hood carefully, his hands steady despite the tension in the air. He traced the lines of the engine, touched the cables, and even paused for a moment to close his eyes and feel the vibrations. It was almost like he was talking to the car, in a language only they shared. The air felt heavy, charged with anticipation, and Richard's smirk didn't fade. Yet, the roar of the engine had a rhythm, and to anyone else it was chaos. But to Tom it was a map. Every sound, every irregularity told him exactly where the problem was hiding. A small misalignment, a single overlooked detail, enough to ruin the engine, yet small enough to be almost invisible. He smiled faintly. He had already begun seeing the solution. The garage seemed to shrink around them. The walls, the old posters, the smell of oil, everything faded into the background. It was just Tom, the car, and the challenge. Even the hum of the compressor felt distant, muted. Every breath, every glance of the onlookers was like a drumbeat, heightening the tension. And as Tom leaned over the engine, ready to start working, a sense of inevitability filled the room. Everyone could feel it. Something extraordinary was about to happen. The humble mechanic in the small garage was about to take on a car that had defeated the best, and nobody could predict what would happen next. Richard Evans leaned against the car, smirking. "So, this is the famous mechanic everyone talks about," he said, his tone dripping with mockery. The others in the garage shifted uncomfortably, sensing the tension. No one wanted to challenge a billionaire, and Richard made it clear that he expected failure. "You probably can't even figure out what's wrong with it," he continued, circling the car. "The best engineers in the world tried and failed. Let's see if you even understand a thing." His words were sharp, designed to humiliate. Tom felt the weight of every glance and every whisper, but he didn't flinch. His calm gaze met the engine, not Richard. The garage felt smaller, the air thicker. The other mechanics tried not to stare, but curiosity got the better of them. They watched as Tom crouched, tools ready, facing a challenge that most would run from. The contrast was stark. A simple, humble man against a machine worth millions, under the scrutiny of a man used to getting everything he wanted. Richard leaned closer, trying to get a better look. "Go on," he sneered. "Show me what you've got. I'm dying to see you fail." His voice was loud, echoing off the cracked walls. The tension grew with each word. The onlookers exchanged glances, some secretly rooting for the billionaire, others secretly hoping Tom could prove them all wrong. Tom ignored the insults. He let the engine speak to him, feeling its rhythm, listening to the clicks and vibrations that others had overlooked. Each second passed slowly, like time itself was holding its breath. He traced cables and inspected every component with precision. The machine had secrets, and he was ready to uncover them. Richard's smirk faltered slightly as he noticed the calm determination in Tom's eyes. There was no fear, no hesitation, just focus. Let's see if this guy even moves a finger," he muttered under his breath, though the doubt had already started creeping in. The irony of the situation was that the billionaire had underestimated the simplest man in the room. The whispers of the other mechanics grew softer, replaced by silence filled with anticipation. Every movement Tom made seemed deliberate, measured. He was taking control of the challenge without saying a word. The more Richard tried to intimidate him, the more his own arrogance became clear. The humble mechanic had the upper hand in an invisible battle. And in that moment, with the engine humming faintly and the billionaire watching every move, it was obvious. Tom wasn't here to fail. The challenge wasn't humiliating him. It was highlighting the skill, patience, and quiet confidence that could overcome even the most arrogant doubt. Everyone waited, breathless, to see the first step toward the impossible. The garage fell completely silent. Every eye was on Tom, waiting, anticipating, unsure if he would succeed or fail. The hum of the old radio and the distant sounds of the street faded into the background. All that mattered was the mechanic, the car, and the billionaire's impossible expectations. Richard Evans crossed his arms, leaning slightly forward, his gaze sharp and impatient. "Don't tell me you're just standing there. Start already," he barked, though his voice carried a trace of doubt. The arrogance remained, but beneath it, a flicker of unease showed. Tom, however, remained calm, almost serene, letting his eyes study the engine as if it were a puzzle speaking directly to him. The other mechanics exchanged quiet glances. Some held their breath, uncertain, while others whispered softly, "He won't make it." The tension in the air was almost physical. The smell of oil and grease mixed with the metallic scent of the engine, making the space feel charged with anticipation. Everyone sensed that this wasn't just about fixing a car, it was about proving something much bigger. Tom knelt beside the engine, hands poised, ready to move. The subtle vibrations of the motor seemed louder now, almost like a heartbeat. He leaned closer, listening intently. The silence around him wasn't empty. It was full of expectation, a quiet pressure that could crush most people. But Tom didn't flinch. He thrived in it. Richard paced slightly, watching every movement, clearly trying to intimidate him. "Come on, everyone's watching. Don't embarrass yourself," he said, half mockingly, half desperate. Yet, as Tom reached for the first component, nothing about him suggested nervousness or fear. Every motion was confident, precise, like he had done this 1,000 times before. The onlookers felt it too. Their curiosity and doubt collided in the air, creating a tension that made the seconds stretch longer than they should. Everyone was holding their breath, aware that one wrong move could shatter the moment, but also aware that something incredible could happen. Tom paused for a moment, placing his hand gently on the engine. He closed his eyes for a second, feeling the vibrations, understanding the rhythm. It was as if he could hear the engine whispering its secrets. The quiet around him deepened. Even Richard's sharp eyes couldn't break the intensity. And then, with deliberate calm, Tom began to work. Every touch, every adjustment was precise. The tense silence hung in the air, heavy and expectant. The garage wasn't just a space anymore. It was a stage, and the humble mechanic was about to show everyone that skill, patience, and quiet confidence can silence even the loudest doubts. Tom ignored the whispers, the impatient glances, and even the arrogant stares of Richard Evans. He crouched closer to the engine, hands steady, eyes sharp. Every sound, every subtle vibration spoke to him in a language only he seemed to understand. To the outside world, it looked like silence and stillness, but inside, Tom was completely in control. Richard shifted uncomfortably, crossing his arms tighter. "I don't see how he can even know where to start," he muttered under his breath. The confidence of the billionaire began to crack, though he didn't admit it aloud. The other mechanics watched, barely daring to breathe, as Tom traced each wire, inspected each connection, and felt every movement of the engine. The hum of the motor was almost musical to Tom. He could tell where the problem began and where it spread. He moved deliberately, almost as if he were dancing with the engine, responding to its rhythm, coaxing it gently, listening to the subtle clicks and whirs. Nothing rushed him. The more pressure built, the more focused he became. Every hand movement was precise, every glance calculated. The other mechanics, despite themselves, felt a strange awe. Tom didn't seem to notice the tension, the stares, or even the immense pressure of Richard Evans's scrutiny. He was a master in his element, calm yet completely aware, letting intuition guide his hands. Richard leaned closer, almost leaning over Tom, trying to see a mistake. "This guy doesn't even know what he's doing," he said louder this time, more as a command than a statement. But the smirk faded from his face as he realized Tom wasn't rushing or panicking. The engine responded to every gentle touch, every careful adjustment. Tom's calmness was unnerving. The more Richard tried to intimidate him, the stronger his presence seemed. It wasn't arrogance, it was mastery. The garage felt like it had shrunk, all focus narrowing onto the mechanic and the impossible machine before him. The hum of the engine, once chaotic, was starting to feel organized, like it trusted him. The other mechanics couldn't believe their eyes. Years of experience and knowledge didn't compare to what Tom was doing right now. They exchanged glances filled with astonishment, realizing that this quiet, humble man was commanding the engine in a way that seemed almost magical. And as the moments stretched, the tension grew thick in the air. But Tom didn't flinch. His calm, focused presence filled the room, and everyone watching felt it. He wasn't just fixing a car. He was rewriting the rules of what was possible, showing that skill, patience, and unwavering focus could conquer even the most impossible challenges. As Tom worked, his mind drifted for a moment, remembering his father. He could see him clearly in the small, cluttered garage of his childhood, showing him how to listen to a car like it was a living being. "Listen carefully, son. Every car has a voice," his father would say, hands guiding his own over an engine. That memory always grounded him, reminding him where his talent came from. Even as a boy, Tom had been fascinated by engines. While others played outside, he would be there, tinkering with radios, fans, and anything with a motor. His father didn't just teach him the mechanics. He taught him patience, observation, and respect for the machine. Those lessons stuck, shaping every movement Tom made now. He remembered the countless hours spent practicing, learning from mistakes, and trying again. The smell of oil, the grease-stained overalls, the sound of engines humming, everything became part of his rhythm. The skill he had now wasn't just technical, it was instinct, honed over years of curiosity and dedication. The memory of his father's words echoed in his mind. "A car speaks, son. You just have to learn to hear it." And Tom could. He could feel the subtle vibrations, the tension in the belts, the quiet whisper of misaligned parts. That knowledge, passed down with love and patience, was now giving him the edge nobody else had. As the sound of the engine filled the garage, he felt the connection. He wasn't just fixing a machine, he was continuing a legacy. Every touch, every adjustment was a conversation with the car, a dance taught by his father and refined by experience. Even Richard, oblivious to the history behind Tom's calm, began to sense that there was more than skill at work. There was an understanding, a bond between man and machine that no amount of money could buy. The silence in the garage grew heavier, filled with anticipation and a quiet respect for the humble mechanic. Tom shook off the memory just enough to focus on the present. He traced each wire, checked every bolt, and listened intently. The flashback reminded him that patience and attention to detail were his greatest weapons. The billionaire's doubts, the stares of onlookers, they meant nothing compared to the wisdom and instincts that had been built over a lifetime. And in that moment, with the engine humming gently under his touch, Tom realized the secret to solving this challenge wasn't a complex tool or a fancy technique. It was listening, feeling, and trusting what he had learned long ago. This was his moment, and he was ready. Within minutes, Tom found it, a tiny flaw, invisible to anyone else, something even the most skilled engineers had missed. A small misalignment, a single wire slightly off, a detail so minor that it could easily be overlooked, but enough to cripple the engine completely. His eyes lit up, but he didn't speak. This was the moment that would change everything. Richard leaned closer, curiosity mixing with impatience. "Well, found it yet?" he asked, though his voice betrayed a hint of uncertainty. He was used to being the smartest person in the room, but now the humble mechanic was on the verge of proving him wrong. The other mechanics barely dared to breathe, watching Tom with wide eyes. Tom traced the tiny problem with a finger, feeling the imperfection. He smiled faintly, as if he had solved a puzzle that nobody else could even see. Everything about the car suddenly made sense. It wasn't complicated. It was just subtle. The flaw had been hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone patient enough to notice it. The tension in the garage shifted. The impossible car no longer seemed untouchable. Tom had unlocked its secret, the one thing the billionaire and the engineers had overlooked. His confidence grew, calm and quiet, yet powerful. Richard's smirk began to falter as he realized this wasn't luck. It was talent, intuition, and years of experience. The other mechanics leaned in, trying to see what Tom had discovered. Whispers ran through the room. How did he see that? "It's impossible." But Tom didn't speak. He let the car speak, let the solution guide his hands. Every movement now had a purpose. Every adjustment was precise. It was almost effortless. Tom didn't rush. He used simple tools, touched the delicate components with care, and corrected the flaw that had defeated so many before him. The engine's hum shifted subtly, smoother, like it had been waiting for this moment. Even Richard's breath caught in his throat. The silence in the garage deepened, heavy with anticipation. Everyone could feel it. The moment of truth was about to arrive. The tiny discovery, so easily overlooked, had become the key to solving the impossible. Tom's calm focus made the moment almost cinematic, every detail magnified in the eyes of the onlookers. And as he prepared to make the final adjustments, Tom knew it. This wasn't just about fixing a car. It was about proving that patience, observation, and quiet skill could conquer arrogance and doubt. The impossible was about to become reality, and everyone in the room was about to witness it. Tom picked up his tools with steady hands, focusing entirely on the engine. Every movement was deliberate, precise, as if he were painting on a canvas. The garage seemed to hold its breath, the tension almost tangible. He knew exactly what to do, and there was no room for error. Richard watched closely, his arms crossed, trying to mask the growing unease. "Let's see if you can even start it," he muttered, but his voice wavered. Tom ignored him completely, his attention fully on the machine. Every touch, every twist, every adjustment spoke of years of experience, intuition, and an almost uncanny understanding of engines. The engine shuddered slightly, then steadied under Tom's hands. A small click here, a gentle turn there, and suddenly the car began to hum smoothly, the vibrations shifting from chaotic to perfect harmony. The impossible car, which had defeated so many, now responded to him as if it recognized its master. The other mechanics stepped back, unable to contain their astonishment. Eyes widened, mouths slightly open, some even whispered to each other. None of them could believe what they were seeing. A humble man, working with simple tools, had performed a feat that others had deemed impossible. Richard's smirk vanished completely. He leaned forward, straining to comprehend what was happening. The roar of the engine now sounded clean, precise, and powerful. It was undeniable. Tom had done what no one else could. The air in the garage vibrated with disbelief and awe, heavy with the weight of an unexpected triumph. Tom wiped his hands on his pants, standing slowly, calmly, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But the engine told a different story. Its perfect rhythm echoed through the garage, each note of its hum a testament to his skill. The impossible car was alive again, and everyone watching knew it had been transformed by his hands. The silence in the garage was deafening. No one spoke, no one dared move. Even Richard's usually loud voice was gone, replaced by a stunned, almost reverent pause. It wasn't just the engine that had been fixed, it was the perception of what was possible. And as Tom stepped back, looking at the car with a quiet sense of satisfaction, it became clear he hadn't just repaired a machine, he had commanded it, understood it, and mastered it in a way that left everyone in awe. The humble mechanic had accomplished the impossible, and no one would ever forget it. The garage erupted with disbelief, though silently. Eyes widened, jaws dropped, and whispers ran through the room like wildfire. Every mechanic, every onlooker stared at the car in awe, struggling to process what they had just witnessed. Tom had turned the impossible into reality, and no one could deny it. Richard Evans stepped back, his confident posture faltering. He stared at the car, then at Tom, unable to form words. The arrogance that had filled the room moments ago had vanished, replaced by stunned admiration. The billionaire, so used to being the smartest man in the room, was speechless, and that silence spoke volumes. The other mechanics couldn't contain their excitement. Some exchanged high fives, others shook their heads in disbelief. The whispers grew into murmurs of respect. "I can't believe he did that. How did he even know where to start?" Everyone realized that the humble man in front of them had done what none of them thought possible. Even the assistants who had come along with Richard paused, their mouths open in astonishment. It wasn't just about fixing a car. It was about witnessing skill, patience, and focus in its purest form. Tom had become a symbol of quiet mastery, a reminder that talent can appear in the most unexpected places. Richard cleared his throat, trying to regain composure, but the words failed him. He had faced engineers, experts, and specialists, and yet here was Tom, a simple mechanic, having solved the problem effortlessly. His disbelief was palpable, as if reality itself had shifted in that small garage. The hum of the engine filled the space, now smooth and perfect, a sound that reinforced the impossible achievement. Tom stood calmly, hands clean now, eyes steady. His demeanor radiated quiet confidence. Everyone in the garage, even Richard, felt the weight of what had just happened. No one spoke for a few moments, caught between amazement and respect. The collective astonishment was overwhelming. It wasn't just about the car, but about the man behind it. Tom had earned admiration, not through words or boasting, but through action, skill, and composure under pressure. And in that stunned silence, it became clear. The humble mechanic had done more than fix an engine. He had commanded respect, proving that true mastery doesn't care about wealth, arrogance, or status. Everyone watching had been left in awe, and the memory of that moment would linger long after the engine's roar faded. Richard Evans tried to compose himself, though his pride had clearly taken a hit. He opened his mouth to speak, perhaps to insult or to offer something, but no words came out. He had underestimated the humble mechanic, and now the reality of his failure weighed heavily. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a thick envelope filled with money. "Take this," he said, his voice tight. "Consider it a bonus for your effort." But Tom shook his head, smiling faintly. "It's not about money," he said calmly. "It's about respect. That's something no amount of cash can buy." The billionaire's jaw tightened. He had faced many challenges in his life, but few had left him speechless. Richard realized that his arrogance, his belief that wealth and status could solve any problem, had been his greatest weakness. The mechanic, in his humility, had revealed the truth. Skill and integrity are far more valuable than money. The other mechanics watched, nodding in silent approval. They felt a wave of admiration for Tom, understanding that this was more than a job well done. It was a lesson, delivered quietly but powerfully. Even Richard, in his pride, couldn't ignore the truth. Tom's refusal of the money made a statement louder than any words. He had proven that true mastery comes with patience, respect, and heart, not wealth. The engine purred smoothly under his hands, a silent testament to his talent. Everyone could see it, even the billionaire. Richard finally exhaled, his shoulders sagging slightly. The moment had humbled him. The money he offered had no power here. The respect he hoped to buy could not be purchased. The man before him, hands dirty and proud, had earned something far greater. Tom stepped back, cleaning his hands on a rag, his calm demeanor radiating quiet triumph. The room felt lighter, the tension dissolved, replaced by a sense of awe and admiration. Even the billionaire could only watch, silently acknowledging that the mechanic had bested him in skill and integrity. And in that moment, the lesson was clear to everyone. Arrogance and wealth mean nothing in the face of true talent and humility. Richard Evans, once so sure of his superiority, had been humbled by the quiet power of a humble mechanic who refused to compromise his values. A video of the scene had already started circulating online. Within hours, it went viral. People everywhere were talking about the humble mechanic who had silenced a billionaire with nothing but skill and determination. Tom's talent became a story that inspired countless others. Companies, both large and small, began to reach out. Automotive firms, tech startups, even local garages wanted to meet him, to learn from him, to have him on their team. The man who had quietly worked in a small, forgotten garage was suddenly in demand, sought after not for wealth, but for talent, humility, and integrity. Tom received the recognition without changing who he was. He continued to wear his old jumpsuit, to work with his hands, and to listen to the machines the way he always had. Fame didn't alter his approach or his values. To him, respect and passion mattered far more than money or status. People admired him, not just for fixing the impossible car, but for how he carried himself. He had stayed true to his principles, proving that humility and skill could triumph over arrogance and wealth. His story became a symbol of hope and determination for anyone who had ever felt overlooked or underestimated. Even Richard Evans couldn't ignore the impact. His private network was buzzing with messages about the mechanic, and he realized the reach of Tom's achievement. The billionaire watched quietly as the world began to recognize the man he had once doubted, his pride tempered by undeniable respect. Local newspapers, blogs, and social media posts celebrated Tom's feat. Comments flooded in, praising his dedication, his calmness under pressure, and the fact that he refused to be bribed. Everyone who saw the story understood one thing: talent and character could shine brighter than wealth and arrogance. Tom smiled quietly as he read some of the messages online. The recognition was nice, but it wasn't why he worked. He had proven something to himself, and the world had finally caught on. It was a quiet victory, deeply satisfying and entirely earned. And in the end, the humble mechanic from a small, forgotten garage had become a symbol, proof that skill, heart, and humility can leave a mark on the world far louder than money ever could. Richard Evans watched from a distance, silent, as Tom cleaned his grease-stained hands and packed up his tools. The billionaire was used to controlling everything, but here control was impossible. The humble man had shown that skill, patience, and integrity mattered far more than money or power. The lesson was quiet but unmistakable. Tom smiled faintly, satisfied with the work done. He didn't need applause or immediate recognition. The respect he earned was enough. He had proven that talent and dedication always shine through, no matter the circumstances. Richard's silence said more than words ever could. The other mechanics and onlookers were still in shock. Some applauded quietly, others just stared, absorbing every detail. It was hard to believe what they had seen, yet undeniable. Tom had silenced everyone with his ability. The lesson went beyond the car. It was about humility, respect, and perseverance. Richard tried to disguise his humiliation, but the admiration was there. He had faced many challenges, but few had left him so stunned. He realized wealth and status didn't guarantee superiority. True skill and character did. The quiet mechanic had just taught him a lesson money couldn't buy. Tom packed his tools carefully, taking one last look at the car. Every detail was perfect, every part functioning as it should. His mission was complete, not for money or fame, but for the respect he earned. That respect was the greatest reward of all. As he walked toward the garage exit, people continued to watch. Some smiled, others remained speechless. The story of a humble mechanic facing an impossible challenge and triumphing would spread, inspiring all who heard it. Richard remained frozen, watching Tom leave. He said nothing, just observed. The silence spoke volumes. The billionaire understood now. Respect, humility, and true ability cannot be bought. Tom's pride, with hands covered in grease, was worth more than any fortune. And so, Tom disappeared through the garage gate, carrying not only the satisfaction of victory, but also the certainty that talent and character always stand out. The world could continue turning. The billionaire could return to his luxuries, but the lesson of the humble mechanic would echo far beyond that small garage, showing that greatness comes from heart, dedication, and courage.